All right. So welcome everybody who's joined us already. Thank you for joining us today, taking time out of your Friday morning. My name is Julie Kallenbach, and I am a consultant for education, but I also work for ISB for the Kids Project. And I'll let my partner, Pat Chamberlain, introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Pat
Or
Chamberlain,
maybe not.
and I also am a consultant that works around the state around issues of language and culture, particularly for early childhood. I was most recently the director of the Award of Excellence for Early Childhood for culturally and linguistically appropriate practice. And Julie and I work around the state working with the Birth to Third Continuity Project and with districts who are really trying to connect the preschool to kindergarten piece particularly, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
So I'll begin the webinar. This will be archived for your use with other people, along with a PowerPoint handout and some of the other handouts we will reference. They will be available on the Birth to Three Continuity website. Feel free to type in any questions or comments as we move through this information, and we will have some stopping points to make sure we can respond to your questions. So we hope you leave this hour today knowing some of the key features to look for when you're visiting a preschool or kindergarten high-quality, developmentally appropriate program, and that you understand that playful learning has been backed by 30 years of research about the positive outcomes it has for children intellectually, academically, and socially, and that how are the developmentally appropriate practices evident in the Danielson framework, which now has the early learning examples. So our first task is to do a poll for who's in the room. We want to know who's sharing our hour today. So Ashley, if you'll do the poll. Please click the role that's most describes what you do, knowing you often have multiple roles. So of our people with us today, 24% of our more kindergarten elementary, mostly administrators today, no teachers. So we did gear this toward administrators, so this works really well for us. It might be coaches or community personnel, which are always good links to the Birth to Three continuity movement. Hold on here. So this webinar is brought to you by the Birth to Three Continuity Project. This is a collaboration overseen by the Center for the Study of Education Policy, the Illinois State Board of Ed, and the Governor's Office of Early Childhood Development. The focus has been on the 20 communities that have preschool expansion grants. But this birth to third grade movement really intends to promote the high quality, developmentally appropriate practice that's really needed to sustain the gains children make in preschool, so that at that critical third grade checkpoint, there isn't fade out. There has been some research to show children sometimes lose all those gains they made in preschool if attention is not made to sustainability. But the preschool fade out effect is not inevitable. We can maintain and increase learning and development by following those developmentally appropriate practices. The two foundational principles are really meeting children where they are. Teachers need to get to know where each child is and what they are like and where they're on the developmental continuum. This always includes what is their home language, what is their proficiency in English language, what is their culture like, their family, and their interests. And knowing where children are, we could then plan out challenging but achievable goals. We look to put children in activities where they can flourish, where that's challenging enough to them but achievable. So this means administrators need some time and training for teachers in adjusting that instruction of children from various levels. These 2 points are the foundational principles of developmentally appropriate practice and should really be every teacher's mantra. We need to be teaching the unique children that show up in front of us, not just a step-by-step curriculum. If we don't know where they are and what we need to work with them, we will lose instructional time. And it's really not about who doesn't fit that typical kindergarten student. It's about knowing that there's unique stages in development and how to scaffold their learning. And this also then leads us to what Pat talked about, is that vertical articulation. We really need time for preschool and kindergarten and first grade teachers to talk with each other. In order to avoid this fade out, we need alignment, an alignment of curriculum and assessment and the instructional practices. And we have found that, research has found that we need that continued investment in parent engagement. We pay a lot of attention to including parents in the preschool years, but some of that fades out as children move up the educational ladder. So researchers have recommended these practices to avoid that fade out. Again, alignment of standards, alignment of assessments that are within grade levels, but also across grade levels. Knowing that we need to use formative assessments linked to standards. They do recommend a database that helps follow children from preschool through elementary. There needs to be a clear instructional framework that helps guide practices along the way. Continuity in the relative emphasis on social, emotional, and academic. We put a lot of emphasis in the preschool years on social, emotional, and self-regulation, and that sometimes that attention to that area of development fades out once they enter the elementary school. So we need to, and I think we see a lot more of that happening now with attention to social emotional standards. Continuity in curriculum. How do we introduce children to topics and then go deeper as they develop? Coordinated professional development among those pre-K to third grade teachers. A recommendation that's always not possible, but how helpful it would be if there was the same coach working with teachers across pre-K to 3. And then those opportunities for teacher collaboration across the grade levels. So this is what the Birth to 3 Continuity Project intends. They want to strengthen the community's ability to develop these high quality systems with exactly what the researchers said: aligned assessments, data-driven improvement, comprehensive wraparound services, making sure we have aligned curriculum instruction, supporting those transitions into preschool, from preschool to kindergarten to first grade, and then again that joint professional development and attention to family and community. So I want to do a quick poll here. Since we know that continuity and consistency are key components to avoiding fade out in your workplace, are your instructional practices similar from preschool to kindergarten? So we can get a pulse of the room. So after you click submit, we will look at the results. So as you can see on the results, that about a little over half have some of the instructional practices similar. And then it's 43% have few of the instruction practice similar. So we're going to spend the time today talking about what are those instructional practices that really impact and can be continued into the elementary grades. So our first key feature of developmentally appropriate practice is the inclusion of play. Why do we play? What does research say about play as an instructional vehicle? One of the first reasons why we play is reflected in this information from the World Economic Forum, and this resource is listed at the end of our PowerPoint. We know that future jobs, you can see, are going to need complex problem-solving skills, the critical thinking, creativity, people management, and working with others, and emotional intelligence, which means you can read your own emotions, but also empathy with understanding each other's emotions. So these are all the top skills predicted by the World Economic Forum. in 2020. We know we can practice all of these skills in play. The 3 points they talked about was that problem solving, the creativity and emotional intelligence. If you're an administrator of kindergarten, this is one of the measures on the kids' assessment. And you can see that when we are doing play and pretend play, we are addressing those key components that are predicted to be useful in 2020. When children are doing in-depth, mature play, they are organizing. They are sharing elaborated ideas. They have to negotiate. They have to adjust their play as they're playing. They have to take into consideration the ideas and interests of others. And they have to think about engaging things with friends and complicated roles and well-coordinated systems. When you see mature players, you see children who often spend the majority of their time planning out their play and talking about their play, even beyond playing so much about it. So this is where children learn all of these skills that they will need to be a high-quality worker in 2020. This is also a key component of executive functioning. This is a map from the Harvard University Center on the Developing Child, a graph that shows executive function skills start right after birth, but they really peak during that 3 to 6 year old window of dramatic growth in those skills. Then these skills continue to grow throughout the teenage years and start to flatten out about around age 25, which we know is when the frontal lobe fully matures. So play is the vehicle that helps build these executive function. Some of those skills are cognitive flexibility, working memory, and the self-regulation of their emotions and actions. So how does play develop executive function? When children are playing, they talk about and develop rules about how they're going to play. They decide who's going to be the vet, who's going to be the dog, who's going to be the cashier. And while they're developing all these rules and deciding on roles, they learn how to hold those complex ideas in their mind and build their working memory. When they have to stay in a role, and someone's got to, I'm hearing somebody, if they could mute them.
I know, I think everybody's muted though.
Okay.
If you're not, can you double check for me? It looks like, I'm not sure where it's coming from. Sorry.
So when children have to shape these rules and roles, they have to inhibit their impulse to go outside of their role. This is how they practice their self-regulation. And that learning to play cooperatively and learning how to, while they're learning to play cooperatively, they often have to regulate each other's behavior. And this other regulating is also an important part of developing self-regulation. We often call that tattling, but that is really a developmental stage of children when they they recognize the rules, they can express them toward others, but they still have to develop that within themselves. So play-based learning. If you could just read this to yourself. Active experiences between children, because those peer interactions play a critical role in cognitive learning and in social development. This slide shows that, lest you doubt that children learn through play, we need to keep in mind that most play involves some kind of exploration, and that exploration by definition is really an act of investigation. This is one of the major premises of the next generation science standards. Children, the basis of science is learning to explore and investigate and then communicate their investigations. You can see that when you see children playing with magnets, but it also goes even to other intellectual pursuits where they investigate through rough and tumble. They investigate how far can I go without upsetting another person. All of this active play is how they explore their environment. Play is also a gateway to flow. That flow is that idea that you're so engaged in something that you're totally happy, you're immersed in what you're doing, and you can see that when children are totally engaged in an activity, they're in that state of flow. If they're not in a state of flow, what you see is non-engagement, you see boredom, and you'll see acting out behaviors. So when teachers often do the same tasks for all children, and it's more teacher directed, such as worksheets or only doing whole group activities or science experiments that the teacher does and the children watch, you won't see the children as engaged and in that state of flow. And evidence also exists that play is a tutorial for coping with real life challenges. This is how children practice how to handle their emotions. They learn that if I've been sick, I can play doctor and work through some of those feelings. If I've experienced something at home about jail, we can talk about jail and think about how does that make me feel as I play through catching the bad guy and catching the police coming to my house. This is where children can have an opportunity to learn how to handle those emotions. Play is also a social justice issue. There's evidence that children from poverty and racially underrepresented groups have lower quality playgrounds. They have less time in their schedule for recess. And these very same children who need more hands-on exploration, more practice with organizing and negotiating and play, are often the ones that are given more didactic, teacher-led instruction and pull-out interventions. So instead of getting more of what they need, they're put in situations where it's even less engaging for them. And so we can see more, even more acting out. So we'll switch this over to Pat.
And I'm going to go a little deeper into the notion of guided play. One of the things that arises very often in our conversations with administrators is this notion of, this free-for-all play really doesn't move kids along, and it's noisy, and the teachers are not as engaged in play. And those folks are right on target. What we're looking for in a playful, in a high-quality play-based program is that teachers are guiding the play. And there's some really powerful research from Skolnick, and that's in your bibliography if you want to read more about it, that talks about guided play means that we are maintaining this joyful, child-directed free play, but we're adding on a piece that has to do with what the adults are. So we're making what they call a light adult scaffold to up the challenge, up the learning goal, connect it to our learning standards, and make the play grow and deepen to higher and higher levels. Because with a high level, mature, dramatic play, that's where we get to see the high level of executive functioning. We don't see that in low-level play. And I'll give you my favorite example on that one is I was in a room where I was playing with a group of kids, and they were rolling cars down a ramp, and they tried a variety of different cars with wooden wheels, plastic wheels, rubber wheels, and then some objects with no wheels. And they were trying to look at velocity and trajectory, how far it would fall, the cars would fly, and planning experiments. They got a little loud. They were boys. They got a little loud, and the teacher got a little nervous, and she came and undid that and brought them over to say, oh, maybe we can build a farm. So the kids started to do what she said. The talking stopped, the joyfulness stopped, the level of cognitive engagement, the concepts that they were thinking about dropped precipitously. And so when we're talking about guided play, we're trying to talk about challenging high-level thinking, challenging kids to experiment. Yes, Julie, thanks. one of the benefits then of doing that has to do with the issue of really helping young children develop and practice their social emotional skills. Students in classrooms that use developmentally appropriate practices have fewer stress behaviors. And I think we are seeing such an increase in stress and in our youngest learners. Trauma-informed care is real. We have to learn about it because we have so many children who are coming to us with inappropriate behaviors because they haven't had much time to practice, because they've been on screens, or their parents have been on screens, or they haven't been working or playing with other children. So children and Julie and I can attest to the fact that when we walk into an inappropriate classroom, there are all kinds of behaviors we see happening when the activity is not developmentally appropriate. And when it switches to a developmentally appropriate activity, boom, the stress behaviors either are gone or are significantly reduced. So children need the opportunity to practice. Another benefit of play has to do with vocabulary. And there was in the No Child Left Behind era, we've been working on accountability and lots of drill and kill on vocabulary. We know vocabulary is important, and it is, but this research is just an example of how infusing vocabulary in guided play was a more powerful instructional strategy, particularly for kids that come from disadvantaged language backgrounds, so not as much language going on. And this is compared to children who had a direct instruction approach and children who were just free playing. So the role of the teacher in play is to scaffold language, is to use vocabulary that goes to that next level, but to use it. And what I talk about every training we do, we talk about what is the language we need to play that. If you aren't building the language you need to play that, you won't have children that will be able to read and understand abstract concepts, because in play, we are using our language to develop an abstract scenario that all children buy into, and that's what we have to do when we are comprehending reading. The next reason, if you will, around guided play is that, again, in this research study, they looked at guided play, how children developed math skills, spatial skills, geometry skills in particular, and found that guided play was the most effective approach in helping children learn and internalize these complex geometric concepts. And they did better than better than direct instruction, and better in the free play condition. So we're really underlining this notion of guided play. In this picture, you see this little guy. When I walked in, he was just lining up these blocks. And when I challenged him to think about, you see the block that's sort of far away from the blocks he's building, when I challenged him to guess how many blocks it would take for him to get to that spot, the engagement level changed dramatically. So in this poll, let's take a look at what's your comfort level about when you go into a classroom, what are you looking for? So rate yourself in terms of how comfortable you are in what to look for in a developmentally appropriate classroom. And some of you may be more comfortable in in kindergarten or preschool, but the underlying developmentally appropriate practices are the same. Let's see what we've got. Oh, over half of you feel like you've got some knowledge. Ooh, we've got some deep knowledge, folks. So we're preaching to the converted here. So our challenge is how to help you move your colleagues and those with whom you could articulate to that next level. So we're going to do some look-fors. Oh, are there any questions? If you have any questions, this is a time you can put them in the chat box. And I think Miss Julie will address those as I go along.
We don't have any questions right at the moment. We've got a couple people sharing just things that they're doing, which is great.
All right, next slide then. All right, we're going to look at some of the big ones here of what you can look for and what you can see when you're observing. We'll dig a little bit into, we'll spend a few seconds on learning environment, the schedule, thinking about instruction and planning, and then finally have a little bit of conversation around assessment. So when you go into a developmentally appropriate classroom, you will see teachers purposefully and intentionally addressing standards. These are not things that happen just, you know, off the cuff. Their lesson plans have standards embedded in them, and they are planned for in the design of the activities and the materials. There's a balance between teacher-directed and child-led activities. So we always talk about the accordion of I do, we do, you do, and making sure that the balance makes sense for your kiddos. Provide active hands-on experiential learning, and that does not look like everybody sitting down doing a worksheet, even though that might be active, that they're active, but they're not necessarily hands-on. We're also looking for integrating learning across multiple domains. The high-level learning for young kids comes when they're integrating math and language and social and emotional and their physical development, all of these things wrapped together. So when we are doing just one very narrow kind of an activity, very often that's not going to look very developmentally appropriate for someone in that room. And then last but not least, allow sufficient time for child-initiated activities. It always makes me laugh that preschoolers can choose their centers, manage their time just fine, and then they go on to kindergarten, and the kindergarten teachers sometimes feel the need to manage the children's time because the children can't manage their own child-initiated activities when they actually really can. And I've had this conversation with 3rd and 4th grade teachers as well. If we provide the right kind of a classroom environment, children are very, very capable of doing so. So I love this continuum of classroom types, and it'll be interesting for you to think about your preschool and kindergarten classrooms and where they fit on this continuum. Very often when we talk about play-based learning, people think about this on the far left, the laissez-faire, loosely structured classroom where everything's free-flowing. Kids can play as much as they want, but there isn't a lot of adult support, and it often feels like chaos. That's not what we're talking about. On the flip side, we have on the right, the highly didactic, teacher-structured, highly structured classroom where the teacher is in charge of everything. There are scripted curriculum. There's really teachers will say to me, we have so much to get through. We don't have any time to play because there's so much curriculum, and the pacing guides are so intense that you don't really take into consideration where the children are. And so getting through the stuff is more important than teaching children. Where we target is this middle area, where we have classrooms that are rich in child-initiated play, but also have some focused learning within a playful context. So we want children to be grown-ups to be in charge sometimes. These two different learning environments send quite a different message, don't they? When you walk into a room, the philosophy of the teacher is very evident. In the room on the right, the teacher is in charge. It's the sage on the stage. And on the left is an environment where children's learning is facilitated by the teacher. I'll tell my story about, I was in a kindergarten class, working with a kindergarten team for about 2 years, and and we've been talking about environment, couldn't get folks to change from the right to the left very easily. And we took a field trip over to preschool one day, and they looked at their rooms and came back and wanted to change their rooms the next day. The principal about had a heart attack and was ready to kill me. But within the next week, every kindergarten classroom in that building had changed their environment. And the impact of that change and engagement was quite remarkable, and the teachers were, the teacher testimonials were they could not believe how big of a difference it made. The ISU project, the Birth to Third Continuity project, has done a phenomenal job of developing some learning modules that are available to you at this website. We're going to take a look at a couple of them today, but these are learning modules that are designed for you to practice observation using the Danielson framework, and they are videos taken in developmentally appropriate pre-K and K classrooms, both gen ed English classrooms and bilingual classrooms. So we'll show you a few snippets today, but there are so many for you to look at. I encourage you to take a look at them at your leisure, and you could use them with your staff as well. So we're going to look at Zaide's classroom environment in this first video, and I want you to pay attention to both the environment, what are you noticing on environment, and what are you noticing in terms of instruction.
I'm a kindergarten teacher at Ronald O'Neill Elementary School in Elgin, Illinois, and I'm going to show you my classroom. As you can see, my kindergarten classroom is set up as a play-based learning centers where students are the active learner in the classroom. Here we have some banners that we created to our thematic unit where the students were writing enfermería and all the labels by themselves, making them with ownership and being part of the thematic unit. Now, my thematic unit is the Sea Life. This is our writing area. We are making a book, Sea Life book. Muy bien, muy bonito. And the student choose the picture and create the story. We do the writing for the student, with the student, and by the student, and they are the one that help me to create the word wall. In Spanish, we divide the word wall by vowels, by saying sounds. They can write the vocabulary. In this one, for example, a student that is able to, now he was writing ballena beluga. So they are active learners. Also, we divide it by articles, and they are the ones that after I show to them as a teacher model, they can create their own independently. In this area is our reading area where we have some chants, we have some books, we have some non-fiction, fiction books, and we have also class pictures that we create in our classroom. Also, we have different materials where students can be active readers, like reading glasses, ¿qué es el caballito de mar? And different tools that they can use to be active readers. This is our aquarium store. Students come here, they come and buy. The students are the ones that write the name of the object that they will be buying. Like, for example, these sea turtles, they wrote Tortuga and the price. How much is that? It's $99.99, a lot. Also, we have books that they can buy, not leaving literacy behind. This is my ESL area. In our dual language classroom, we have 80% of our instruction is in Spanish, the 20% is in English, and we use color code. English is blue, Spanish is green, and as you can see also that we use to differentiate that language, I use my English hat. So as soon as I put my English hat, I talk in English. And that helps students to create that differentiation. We have our Sea Life restaurant. A student vote for the name of the Sea Life restaurant between Fondo del Mar, El Barco o Mariscos. And Marisco, seafood, was the winner. They create the restaurant menus, the prices, everything is made by them, creating ownership and creating that active learning. This one is my center time. Buenos días. Miren, mis niños, ¿cómo están hoy? Yeah. Where I develop all the guided instruction. We have the calendar. ¿Qué día es hoy? Viernes. Hoy es viernes, ¿qué número? We have the daily schedule. We have the instruction that we create with the students. We have the question of the day. This is a rhyming. Anguila, mochila, lima. Octopus rhymes with fish, yes or no. Students need to think, they need to answer, and need to process that information. This is our fishing area where students, they will fish a sentence, they need to read it. Excelente. You can see they have a lot of hands-on activities where they are learning through play in a fun but powerful environment. This is our aquarium area and it's built by family. We believe that families are really important key in the students' learning and in the student process as they grow. So the families create the fish tanks and they were writing about the process, who was involved with, so making those students with ownership and value that fish tank for them through the play. And last but not least, we have our under the sea area where students will be doing scuba diving, finding the animals. As you see, they are the ones that make all the sea life, all the animals. Everything is made with them, for them, and by them. And this is my classroom. Thank you. Gracias.
As you can see in Zaide's room, there is a layer of play that grows across the entire curriculum that is integrated, thematic. It involves every one of the state standards, and it is embedded with literacy, oral language, reading, writing, and all of it is in the context of a highly engaging, highly interactive, highly child-directed context. And we'll show you in a minute, but you might not be too surprised to find out that Zaide's literacy scores at the end of kindergarten pretty much blow everyone out of the water. So the ability for people to make sure that that they're looking in kindergarten and making sure that that integrated thematic concept goes across all areas, that families are involved. The family projects are so powerful in her class. and that the playfulness is an underlying principle that goes throughout the day, whether it's in a mediated prop like funky glasses or a funny hat, or the props that children make from the maker space. So just a quick example of a couple of schedules. One of the things that people, I was at a conference and the teacher came up to me and turned her name tag around and said that her administrator would not let her play. And she didn't want to see where she was from. And she said, I want to do this, but I can't figure out how to fit it in my schedule. And so giving folks some sample schedules to work from, to make their own, I think is really critical. This is a half day, and it can work in a half day preschool or a half day kindergarten. There are some underlying features that are the same, that really having the ability to work for at least 50 to 60 minutes in preschool, that's a state mandate, and in kindergarten, it's a state recommendation. So that includes independent free choice centers, right, where children are making their own choices. The next one is a full day, and kindergarten teachers do this in a couple different ways. Some folks you can see at the top where they have a chunk of time for the literacy centers, 60 minutes for literacy centers, and then in the afternoon they do a 50-minute block for choice centers. That seems to be probably the most used paradigm or a schedule that we're seeing in kindergarten, but you could have those literacy centers and choice centers all together and have children just have two different times during the day where they could do those. And in some of our high flyer classrooms, we have children that are, they make the choice. They have a plan for the whole week, and they make the choice of how to make sure that they get through every rotation and every center on their own in order to fulfill their obligation with the teacher. Again, working on the self-regulation, working on goal setting, working on independent problem solving. And those, again, are are classrooms where children's academic, language, and literacy scores are very, very high. Here's a time for some more questions or comments. Julie's going to take over, and I will be glad to look at the group chat if you have some questions or comments.
Anything, Ashley, that we need to address right now?
Nope.
Okay, so again, we want to look at those key features, and this is from a release by NACCE, the National Association for Education of Young Children's position paper about what early learning environments should look like. Children need to have time to work on projects for long, extended periods of time. How many times they get really involved in something, and when we have a really rigid schedule, we say, okay, we have to stop that now, and because we're going to move on. Teachers need the flexibility to look at their schedules over a whole week. Yes, maybe I decided that my literacy block is going to go 75 minutes today because the children were, fantastically engaged, and maybe I will make math a little longer another day. Children also have to be outside every day. In Preschool for All, that's a requirement that they get outside every day if the weather permits. And the teacher needs, again, that balance of working with individual children, small groups, and whole groups. The curriculum is adapted to the needs of the students and not followed day by day if it doesn't meet the needs of their students. And when we do all these things, children and their parents look forward to coming to school. So now how do we connect this to the Danielson framework for teaching? So we know that a distinguished teacher, that teacher is a critical feature in developmentally appropriate practices. The teacher has to be available to scaffold the child's learning and behavior. If they're only pulling groups and only watching play, they're not available for those teachable moments. She has to, or he has to, learn and care about their interests and their lives outside of the classroom. You can't plan meaningful instruction and make connections to their background experiences if you don't take the time to learn about this. The teacher needs to model and support all those respectful interactions with the peers. This is what teachers in kindergarten and preschool do probably their first whole semester, really teaching how to be that classroom community. Seizing on those teachable moments, and like Pat said earlier, extending student vocabularies. Do they know the keywords they want for the content? Do they have the language to talk and play? Do they know how to say, I like your idea. Can you play with me? Learning that how to invite children to play. The teacher will also use a variety of questions, which I think a lot of people have been familiar with. And teachers are challenging those students to explain their thinking. So I want to do a quick poll here. We know we have to collect evidence when we're doing teacher observations. And so from your perspective, which of these types of evidence is most difficult to collect for you? If we know this is for a distinguished teacher, what is easy for you to collect, but what is the most difficult? So we're looking for the results. We got them. There we go. Okay. So this is interesting because Pat and I predicted that it would be the first one that people would have the most difficulty with, and that's the highest. So you do have times that you pay attention to the teachers, how they gather about the students' interest in their lives. So that's really encouraging because we thought that would be the most difficult. It looks like the most difficult for this group of people is that watching how teachers seize on those teachable moments, and then how do they challenge their students to explain their thinking. So I want to show you on, close that. Out of one of the resources will show you those powerful interactions, those teachable moments, that there's research to show that those moment-to-moment interactions and actions with children are the most powerful determinant of learning outcomes. That the curriculum is important, but it's what the teacher does that is paramount. So these are two resources that from NACCE. If you order them from them, it's usually cheaper than ordering them from other places. And if you're a member, you get 20% off. Actually, this book on the right, The Big Questions for Young Mind, just came out this spring. It's one of my favorites right now. And if you're a member, it's one of the books you received. It takes each curriculum area and talks about what would questions look like if they were trying to ask the children to apply or to extend or to analyze. So this is a book that's been really helpful in our work with other districts. The Powerful Interaction is one of my all-time favorite books. It's a nice, easy read for people. So if you're looking for some vertical articulation between pre-K, K, and 1, these really are good books about how to enhance those teachable moments. Again, I want to shift a little bit to the connection to Danielson about assessment. So we know that in assessment, teachers need to plan for that assessment as part of the instructional process. And this is something we talk about when we do kids trainings. As the teachers planning their lessons, they should be planning which measures are you going to be collecting evidence for. That we know when we use those formative assessments in instruction, we are reaching children where they are at and creating those teachable moments. And this also gives the teacher needs to be giving students time to self-assess and monitor their own progress. And that's that open-ended questions and challenging their thinking where you can see evidence for this. So why do we do observational assessment? Why is kids the observational assessment required by the state? It's because observation and assessment should be go hand in hand. You embed the assessment in the instruction, not to lose instructional time. So when the teacher is available to the children, These are when the interactions can occur, but that's also where the observations occur. It's a skill that many preschool teachers have had over the years, but many kindergarten teachers are just now developing. How do I observe and teach at the same time? But what we talk to teachers about with observational assessment is making some intentional decisions in your lesson plans even about how you're going to be interacting with children. Is it a day you're going to just listen and watch so you learn more about your children? Are you going to concentrate on expanding? Do you need to do more modeling? Is this my day I'm going to collect some evidence, some of the notes, photos, videos? Or is it a day I'm going to encourage peer-to-peer learning? These skills become more embedded in the teacher's toolbox, but in the beginning, sometimes they just have to plan out what are they going to be doing? What's their role going to be during learning centers, even in the literacy block? There could be time that they're not pulling a group, that they really need to go to the centers to see what's happening in there, children learning what they intend to learn. So we're going to take it another quick video here. This is preschool teachers. She's working on the classroom assessment.
So in that small group, I was looking for specific things in terms of language for the kids to work on making predictions. And I have a sheet that I keep track of the different levels they're at with the indicator that we're working on. So we were working on predictions and experimenting. So in that group, I had a mixed level of language abilities, and I had some students who were English as a second language learners. So I was asking the higher level questions. What do you wonder about? What do you think will happen? And then trying to pull that language from the kids, knowing where they are and trying to move them to the next level. And then while they're playing at the centers, I walk around with my sheet and I also take pictures and kind of see where they are in terms of their play. And I have my list of higher level questions that I can ask them to stimulate their oral language. 8 of my students have IEPs for speech and language, so just trying to get that language out of them while they play and joining in the play, just asking them questions about it is a very powerful thing to do while they're playing. You're making a train track on the bridge? Look. What a great idea. I want to take a picture of that. They're making a bigger one. Wow. That's a great idea. What's going to be under the bridge? It's going to be a road for cars? Ooh, I like that. Hi, friend. You went to speech today? How was it?
So you can see that these videos you can show teachers, you can show other administrators who need some information about how we do this. What I really like about the videos is that you can click it at any point. There's some points on different framework components. And also you can see like that data collection sheet she's using. You can look at some of her resources. So one of the handouts, we're going to give you a summary handout that'll be included with the resources. It gives you a look throughout the day, from morning meeting all the way through literacy and math blocks to the choice playtime. This particular example is learning centers. So you can read what the teacher is doing, what the students are doing, all connected with the different Danielson framework components for early learners. So for example, you can see all the intentionality on the teacher's part. You can see that it's up at the top. It's called guided small groups in oral language, reading, and math. It's not always guided reading. It depends on the needs of the children. One of the groups might be doing more work with oral language. One might be doing more work with just ABCs. So it's just differentiating. The teacher will embed that assessment within there, but you can see what the children are doing too. My favorite one, yes?
Julie, this is Pat. We only have a few minutes left, so maybe we want to just tell people they can take a deeper look at this handout.
Right. Let me go through the, let me just show you the 2 other slides. But this is where you can go in and for yourself do some learning on what developmentally appropriate practice looks like. There's a section on choice centers. There's a section on whole group instruction. So just take a look at this and use it as a guideline for yourself. Any questions or comments here before we summarize it? Okay.
All right, to end our talk today, we wanted to just give you a couple quick data points, since we love to be data driven. Julie and I both worked as early childhood directors in U46, and this data comes from U46, and you can see that this data came from Fontes and Pinnell and looked at reading levels of all of our kiddos, and of the lowest 7% of children in a full day kindergarten, that was our intervention. And you can see that children that are coming from a highly play-based oriented curriculum are scoring and doing well on standardized reading tests, which many of us worry about. Both in English, this is for all of our kiddos, and the next slide is for the kids that speak Spanish in a dual language. And the dual language kids came in to this intervention program with 0 letters. So you can see that the growth is not impacted by play. In fact, it is improved. So we want to leave you with, this is another resource I'm sure that you're familiar with, that ISBE, the Illinois State Board of Education, has redone their website, and there are so many resources on the kindergarten and the preschool website. We encourage you to go and explore if you haven't done so.
Hey, Pat.
Yes.
We got one question just as you're going through and listing all of these resources. The question is, where would you suggest would be the best starting point?
I personally go to the additional resources. That's the one that I use the most. Julie, what do you use the most?
When I go on ISBE's website,
Yeah.
when I'm first doing teachers work, I love the kindergarten expert article. When someone says that your classroom needs to get more rigorous, I go to the Gay-Grunland article about rigorous academics. I like the learning standards. We spend a lot of time, pointing out that's not a standard for kindergarten when the first grade teachers are telling you. So I often go to standards there, but the next slide, these are essential resources. You have a lot of the developmentally appropriate practice book at the bottom right covers all the grade levels. And then they have broken that book out into more focus. So the blue book is focused on kindergarten. The one in the very front is focused on first, second, and third grade. These are extremely useful. And that's where we took the summary handout of what to look for is from these books aligned with the Danielson framework.
Every one of you should have one of these. And to summarize, our time has run out. So just a quick last parting comment is that we want children, this comes from Crisis in Kindergarten, and we want you to remember, children in play-based kindergartens have a double advantage over those who are denied play. They end up equally good or better at reading and other intellectual skills, and they are more likely to become well-adjusted people. So thank you for joining us today. And as our parting gift, we would love to know what are your next steps? What do you want to do in your practice? And then what can we do? What other support could be helpful to you in order to get to those steps? The references, we've given you a bibliography if you want to read more about, but thank you for all of the work you do on behalf of young children. And we honor your work every day. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, everyone. One last note, too, if you haven't noticed in the chat, I did already upload a handout from today and the website where you'll find the archive for all of this. Thanks.
Thank you, Tiana.